Good morning.
Good morning.
At least I know you hear me. To drive 40 miles took me an hour and 45 minutes. Don't travel on Merritt Parkway. So while she's setting up the slides, a brief introduction. My name is Endre Sarkany, and Endre is a nickname. My real name is Endre. I received my nickname from a college student when she was teaching me English a few years back. I was born in Budapest, Hungary, in October 31st, 1936. So if you do your arithmetic correctly, I am 39 years young. Just remember. So I was 87 last October. And God willing, I will be 88 this year. I am married to the same lady for over 54 years. We have 2 children and 5 grandchildren. I came to this country after the Hungarian Revolution in January of '57. The Hungarian Revolution was a major event in Europe, trying to overturn Soviet communism in that country and also in Eastern Europe. Okay. I've been speaking to publicly over 15 years to students like you, younger ones, older ones, also adults in public libraries and universities. And because we have Zoom, I speak around the country. Okay. Are you ready?
Okay.
Next one,
Ready.
please. Just next one.
Okay.
Okay. Here's a map of Europe. That little thing in Eastern Europe or Central Europe is called Hungary. Just as a note, geography changes, and I'm not kidding you, almost as much as we're changing underwear. The next slide will tell you why. So you can see Hungary, a little bit larger picture. On the east, on the west, you have Austria. In the north, that used to be Czechoslovakia. Now it is 2 countries. Okay, Slovakia, about 90 years ago, used to be Hungary. Then you go to the east, you see a little bit of the Ukraine. Actually, it was a much bigger piece of the Ukraine was part of Hungary. Then you go to southeast, is Romania. Actually, between border and Hungary, it used to be called Transylvania, and that was Hungary. The major change when Bill Clinton was president, you look at this on the southwest, it used to be called Yugoslavia, with a dictator called Boris Tito. Now it's 8 countries. So things change very rapidly. The second largest river of Europe is the Danube, coming from Germany to Austria into Hungary, and take a 90-degree turn in the middle of the country, go south eventually to the Black Sea to the east. Okay. Budapest used to be 2 cities, Buda on the west side and Pest on the east side. They merged in mid-1800s. I was born on the Pest side, and I lived all my 20 years there. The next slide is something extremely important to all of us today. Today, tomorrow, after tomorrow. You cannot be a bystander. You just cannot let things go. You have the obligation to stand up and speak up. Doesn't matter what it is. Talk to your friends, family, teachers, clergy, whoever you feel comfortable with. If something bugging you, you need to help yourself, help your friend, family, society. A poem was written by a German Lutheran minister, and he very clearly tells you he's a bystander, which you should not be. Okay? And it says, they came for the communists, and I wasn't, and I did not object because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I did not object because I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for the labor leaders, and I did not object because I wasn't a liberator. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not object because I wasn't a Jew. The last two lines, which is important to you right now. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to object. So the point is, we have an obligation to society to speak up and speak our mind and do not procrastinate. Just do the right thing. The next slide is something extremely important because it is providing a relationship between you and I. Elie Wiesel, who survived the Holocaust, was born, I'm not sure, in Romania, in Hungary. He received the Nobel Peace Prize for all of his effort to eliminate one four-letter word, hate, and I'll talk to you about it later. Eliminate prejudice and hatred. He, in his book, The Night, he told his life story, how he was taken to a concentration camp from his homeland, eventually was liberated by the Americans. And he said, whoever listens to a witness becomes a witness. Bear witness is extremely important in today. Even though we think about when the Holocaust took place a long time ago. No, not really. It's happening almost every day today. It's current. And so please remember, what I'm talking about is present and past. Okay? The next slide will tell you something very simple. Fascist Nazi government slaughtered over 6 million Jews. And not only 6 million Jews, but people don't talk about it. There are close to 6 million non-Jews who were also killed during that period of time. Just think about it, 12 million people, a huge number. Jews have two sayings, never forget and never again. Never again is always referred to the Holocaust and what happened in the late 1930s and the early 1940s should not have happened. Okay? Unfortunately, it happened again last October 7th. So we have to be very careful and understand current environment related to what Elie Wiesel was saying. In related to history, we must learn history all the time. We need to look back to be able to look forward and to be able to go forward. Winston Churchill said in one of his speeches, he was a Prime Minister of England during Second World War, he said, those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And it is happening all the time. We thought that Second World War was the last war we had. But since then, there were many of them happened, and thousands of people died. The next slide will tell you just a simple fact that Adolf Hitler became a Chancellor of Germany in January of 1933. Jewish life almost instantaneously deteriorated to the pit. See, Hitler wanted to create what called a superior race, alienation. I call him racial purification. Devastating. He not only targeted the Jews, but he targeted many other people. The Slovaks, the blacks, the Jehovah's Witnesses, the handicapped, the Romans, or sometimes we refer to it as gypsies. But those are the other 6 million, what I'm talking about. The next slide is extremely important, how I view the Holocaust. Okay. Kristallnacht is a German word, the night of the broken glass. During November night of 1938, the fascist Nazi government of Germany organized small groups of Germans to go around house to house almost everywhere all over in Germany, to break into Jewish homes, to Jewish stores, loot them, drag the Jews out to the street, force them to do slave labor, while thousands and thousands of people on the sidewalks were clapping and smiling and laughing. The brutality, what the Nazis did to the people. One quick example. The Jews were taken out of their home and made them to take their toothbrushes. Our streets in Europe were cobblestones and not asphalt. And they made them to nail down and clean the cobblestones by toothbrushes, while everybody was clapping and laughing. Devastating. Synagogues were burned out. Jewish institution was completely destroyed. That is Kristallnacht. To me, that particular day started in full-fledged the deportation Jews all over from Europe to various concentration camps and death camps. And if you would be able to see the remnants of the death camps, you would get chilled and you would feel like you are living in a different world. I was in Poland for 10 days, a year ago this time. And for 10 days I was crying, saying what really happened with all these people, with brutality by the Nazis. The next slide is very important. It's just took it from Google just to do a street scene, how windows were broken in and looted. Would you wake up and lay your friend next to you? Good morning. You will see on the right upper side a symbol, the Nazi fascist symbol, called the swastika. The swastika has a simple meaning in 2 words. And please don't ever forget it, because it happens to see it in 21st century. Hate and killing, that's what you need to remember. That symbol represents it, okay? We need to remember. So please make a commitment, then you never, ever going to use that 4-letter word, hate, ever. We use that so casually that we didn't even realize when we are saying it. A quick example. Everybody goes to the mall to do shopping. You walk by a window and you see something there, and you say, I hate that thing. No, you don't like it. Or for example, you have a picnic at home. Your parents prepare a beautiful spread for friends and relatives for a special event. And you go and look around and you see something strange there. And then you say, oh, I hate that thing over there. No, you don't. You may dislike it. So please use the English language properly. It's the richest language in the world. So use it how it's supposed to be. Express your opinion or your feeling. But no 4-letter word, please. So please replace that 4-letter word with 2 other 4-letter words. You will be surprised what they are. Love and hope. Those 2 words have real meaning to you in your life. Now, tomorrow, forever. It has attributes, and I just wrote a few things down. Trust, respect, care, honor, compromise, outreach, and stability. Those things have real meaning to you. And if you understand what they are, you will be a happy camper the rest of your life. You will have a smile on your face, and you will be always successful. Now let's talk about Hungary. The next slide will show you that a Hungarian leader, Miklos Horthy, visited Hitler in Germany late 1930s. And he made a commitment that the Hungarian people, the nation of Hungary, will ally themselves in the war effort and the killing of Jews, Hungarian Jews. Hungary had approximately 8.5 million population, and about 650,000 of them were Jews. The majority of the Jews were living in Budapest, which is the capital city, and around the larger cities. Now the next couple of slides is referred to myself and to my family. And the next slide shows you a building. It's about 300 years old. It's still there, and it is using the same function as it was when I was growing up. It is in the 7th district out of the 24th district of the city of Budapest. The location was very critical. My parents moved into this building in 1940, not knowing exactly what it will bring in the future. But it was very heavily populated by Jews, sometimes referred to it a Jewish quarter. The ground floor had a nursery, kindergarten school. Would you wake him up again, please? And a kindergarten nursery school, fully equipped. The top floor was a dance, ballet and acrobat studio. Lot of space was available, and that building became an orphanage for over 150 Jewish kids. Thanks God of the location, all of us with except one survived. My father was taken to forced labor camp. A forced labor camp was basically a local thing. In each country and each places there were places that Jews were rounded up, taken to do slave labor. And the excuse was, we need to participate in a war effort. And we have to do our share. My father was basically gone for months, weeks and months. My mother was fundamentally a single mother. But my life changed in 1943 when my mother enrolled me to first grade. And the next slide will show you the school. 2 blocks apart. In that kindergarten, I went to kindergarten there. The school, this is where I went to, 2 blocks apart. So my mother enrolled me to first grade. And when the school started in September, she took me and said, you can see where the school is. And after a few weeks, she said, you can walk by yourself. And I was a happy camper, a little fellow, 7-year-old. And going to school, 2 blocks, I didn't have to worry about cars. We barely have seen a car. So in my time, cars were a luxury for anybody. Horse and buggy, what we had to worry about. So I'm walking to school, 2 blocks. And after close to a week, I felt real uncomfortable and practically sick. I didn't tell to my mother. But why? I am walking the 2 blocks, people started to sing slogans, which I didn't understand. Death to the Jews. The Jews are bad, destroying our country, and similar slogans. I remember people spit on me. I'm a 7-year-old, go to first grade to learn read, write, and arithmetic. Slap me around, push me to the pavement. I was bruised. I told my mother after a couple of weeks, I cannot go to school anymore. The physical and verbal abuse is overwhelming. So my mother kept me at home. She tried to teach me like homeschooling as much as possible. But why this has happened to a 7-year-old? Why? I'll tell you why. There is only one reason only. Because I'm a Jew. And you know what? I'm a very proud Jew. I was, I am, and I will be. It was a devastating times. It's hard to believe that people can be that cruel. The conditions between Hungary and Nazi Germany wasn't very good. The Nazi government thought that the Hungarians will expedite the deportation of Jews to concentration camps and death camps. And it was basically slowed down. So Hitler made a decision with his military to occupy the country. So let's go to the next slide, please. he decided to occupy the country in March of 1944. The newspapers and the radio were clearly telling to the whole population of Hungary that we must celebrate the Germans coming to Hungary and taking over. The relationship between Horthy and Hitler were deteriorated to the bottom of the pits. He was deposed and sent to exile, so to speak. He wasn't killed. He actually lived his life in Spain or Portugal after the war. The conditions were disastrous. On March, they were coming into Budapest on a pass side of the river Danube, which is the east side. A beautiful white boulevard called the Ring Road. The reason is the Ring Road because it goes from the north part to the south part of the city in a semicircle. A beautiful boulevard today. If you go there, you wouldn't believe the Nazis marched there. My grandfather took me out to the boulevard, and I have seen with my naked eyes.
Sorry, that was me.
Go back, please.
Sorry. I was trying to get a nose light so bad.
If you can go back to the other slide. Anyway, I have seen with my naked eye how the SS marched in on Ring Road in goose caps, black boots, having guns. It was devastating. And guess what? Every one of them were wearing what? An armband with a swastika on it, representing hate and killing. That's what he did. Unbelievable. After a short time, my grandfather took me home. And on the way home, he said, Andy, our life as Jews will permanently change. And you know what? I really didn't understand the word. But this happened 40, 80 years ago, and I have not forgotten the picture. So let's freeze history in March of 1944, and now we go to the next slide, please. I go home on the designated day, on March 17th of 2017. I'm going home, I turn the television on to listen to the news. And I couldn't believe my eyes and my ears, what I have seen and what I have heard. It happened in Charlottesville, Virginia. A bunch of white supremacist thugs were marching, demonstrating, God knows for what. We do have over 50 major white supremacist groups in this country. They are devastating to our society. Look at it. They were marching with flags, particularly there is a Nazi flag representing hate and killing, representing Adolf Hitler's philosophy of killing. These white supremacists hate the Jews, hate the Muslims, hate the blacks, hate the Asian Americans. It would like to create in the same environment what Adolf Hitler had, a pure world of eliminating people who is not meeting their philosophy and ideology. A couple of groups I just mentioned to you. The Proud Boys were the Oath Keepers. They are devastating to this country and devastating to all of us. But there are individuals who are equally bad, in my opinion. Everything I say, it is my opinion. Everybody has opinions. Everybody knows this so-called artist. His name is Kanye West. He has close to 1 million followers in social media. He is a clear anti-Semite. He's telling it openly on the airways and corrupting everybody's brain. The kind of philosophy what Hitler had. There was a basketball player, his name is Carl Irving. Here's the same thing. So be careful. Anti-Semitism, unfortunately, in the 21st century is growing in leaps and bounds. And it is our responsibility to eliminate any kind of a hate. Okay. Social media, be careful. It could devastate you for the rest of your life. Don't ever put anything out there. Why? You cannot take it down. Everybody has opinion, so you can put it out there, like TikTok, or Facebook, or Twitter, or Instagram. Don't believe anything which you read there unless if you verify what it is. This social media is devastating. And be careful. Don't use your valuable learning time looking at your iPhone. The next slide only show you how these thugs were marching and saying the same slogans. That to the Jews. The Jews are bloodsuckers. They should not be in our society. It's just overwhelming. The next slide is even more devastating. You see two pictures there. A picture on the right, there is a white supremacist thug was running around in Washington, D.C. on January 6, 2021, during the insurrection of these white supremacists to trying to destroy this country. But look at what the sweatshirt says. Camp Auschwitz. Just like to tell you that Auschwitz was one of the major killing centers. Actually, two villages called Auschwitz and Birkenau. They are two miles apart. I walked it both ways on the cobblestones on the dirt roads where the Jews were walking to their death. There are over 1.2 million Jews were slaughtered. About 250,000 of them children like you. Devastating. Here it is in the 21st century. There's a German saying written on the sweatshirt, and it says, work sets you free. The Nazis were telling to the Jews that if you work hard, then you will be free. Nobody got free. They all killed. The German saying is, Arbeit macht frei. Devastating. The picture on the right is even more devastating. These thugs were yelling, kill the Vice President Mike Pence. He was there to perform his constitutional duty, which is ceremonial, to verify the election which was held in the previous November. They were close to kill him. They were as close as 60 feet. Our Secret Service saved him and his family for a total disaster. It was an insurrection. Now let's go back to Hungary, 1944. The next picture will show you this person. After the Nazi occupation of Hungary, Hitler dispatched Adolf Eichmann, doing one thing in Hungary, one thing, to round up all the Jews and send them to their death. He created a system, like an assembly line of presses, of sending over 550,000 Hungarian Jews to Auschwitz-Birkenau. And maybe 1% who survived. This man was very proud to declare that my hand was in of killing over 5 million people. That's not a small number. The next slide just show you a lot of dots and colors. Ignore the sizes and the colors. They were all concentration camps and death camps in Europe. The Jews were shipped from all over, from Turkey to Bulgaria, from France to Denmark, Holland, so forth. There were only two nations who were neutral in the war, Sweden and Switzerland. The next slide is related to my family. You will see on the right-hand side my parents in 1940. I was 4 years old. A village where my mother was born called Dunaharastri, and my parents got married. On the right-hand side, the far right, the gentleman is my father. These groups of Jews had just arrived to concentration camps. Why I know that? Because they were still wearing civilian clothing. Because as soon as the trains arrived and the people were taken off, they went through a selection process. But they confiscated everything from them and gave them a striped uniform. They're still wearing civilian clothes. It's really unbelievable what was going on there. The next slide is extremely dear to me. This is a cattle car. Jews were used slave laborers in Germany from day one. But in these cattle cars, the Jews were shipped from various places to concentration camps, death camps, for slaughter. Over 120 people were crammed in there. There is no food, no water, no facilities. It took sometimes 3-4 days by the time the train arrived. When it arrived, many of them were dead. I went up, this particular cattle car is actually displayed in Birkenau. I walked up to it and I touched it, and I was crying and was shaking, because I knew there were hundreds of Jews were traveling in this cattle car to their death. The next slide shows you 3 pictures, and that's the only picture I'm showing to you which looks bad. I can show you worse ones. When a train arrives, these are particularly for the Hungarian Jews. When they arrived to Auschwitz in trains, they were taken off and went through a selection process. Actually, there were 3 groups. The first group was selected by German physicians, trained doctors, so-called intelligent human beings. For medical experiments, they selected people like twins, triplets, handicapped, and other individuals whom they felt good for experiments. Took them to their makeshift hospitals and injected them all kinds of liquids and performed procedures. And they wanted to see what the Jews going to react to, what's going to happen. Anybody who get there didn't make it out, not even 1%. I knew a lady, she is 99, lives in Stanford. She survived that disaster. The lead of this operation was Joseph Mengele, and he had a nickname. His nickname was very well established, the Angel of Death. She would listen to her, Judith, your stomach turned upside down, and you wouldn't be able to eat food for weeks, for sickness. What she went through. Then the remaining people went to a selection. German officers were going through and said, you go there, you go there. Able-bodied people put in one side, the weakling, the children, the elderly, the handicapped put on the other side. After that selection, the able-bodied people were taken, stripped everything from them, and if you walk through in Auschwitz and Birkenau, you will see rooms for our clothing, room for our shoes, eyeglasses, suitcases, but they were confiscated. Give them a striped uniform and put them to slave labor. The other group were taken away and says, you need to clean up, we give you a striped uniform and put you to work. And then they stripped them everything, including the clothing. They shoved them into rooms for approximately 120 to 130 of them. Doors were closed, sealed, and from the shower heads, in place of water, cyanide gas or carbon monoxide. In some cases, they were put in a certain crystal called cyclone B. It was a rat poisoning used all over in the world at that time. And from body heat, it produced fumes. The people who were locked up in 25 minutes, they were dead. Devastating. And able-bodied people, when the doors opened up, had to take the bodies and take them to the furnaces and burn them. What you see here is not a joke, is not a hoax. Today there are people who say the Holocaust didn't really happen. It's a make-believe and the Jews promoting it. There is a memorial in Majdanek, not very far from Auschwitz. When you walk up to the monument, is a dome, and underneath the dome, you actually can see human ashes and bones. So anybody tell you, then it didn't happen, don't ever believe it. Denial. It's happening today in the 21st century. Now let's go back to Hungary. The next slide show you that on April 5th of 1944, the law stated that every Jew must wear a yellow star in the left-hand side of the outer garment. I did wear it, even though we were in the building. And we were children told by the adults, we are not allowed to leave the building at any time. But just in case, the Hungarian Nazis from the Hungarian Nazi Party called the Arrow Cross Party were coming and harassing everybody. Where did the children actually was housed? Every apartment building had, I call them a dungeon, it's like a cellar. A wet clay, uneven flooring. It was a storage area for heating material for all the apartments, either coal or wood. We were there. Because of the kindergarten, we had cots and blankets, so we didn't have to lay down in that wet flooring. And that's where we were. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Every now and then we were allowed to go to the courtyard under strict supervision, in small groups, to play. But these thugs were coming into our building regularly, rounding up the adults from the apartments, take them to the courtyard, put them to the wall. I have seen it. I slipped up from the dungeon area and I have seen my mother there, my grandmother, people who lived in a house, my kindergarten teachers. The only bright moment of the summer of 1944, then the Swedish government dispatched Raoul Wallander to protect Swedish properties in the country. And when he arrived, he immediately realized what the Nazis were doing in Hungary. And he made a commitment that he's going to save as many Jews as possible. He worked with ambassadors who were sympathetic to his cause, to creating documents to protect Jewish life either within the country or trying to send them out of the country. He created safe houses. My second cousin still lives in the same house, safe house, because Wallenberg moved them there. After the war, fast forward, he was called to a meeting by the Soviets, the Red Army, for a meeting about the war. He was captured, accused as a CIA spy, and we never had heard about him. More likely died in the Gulag. But he is honored. Practically every major citizen in Europe for his effort of saving over 80,000 Hungarian Jews from their death. The next slide will show you just a collage of pictures of the city of Budapest of the summer 1944. You will see that the building is labeled as Jewish. You can see the railroad station, and the Jews were rounded up and taken to various selection places with a yellow star on the outer garment. How we were moving toward end of August, beginning of September of 1944. The Hungarian government issued more restriction on Jews. It required that every Jew in the city of Budapest move into a small territory. And here it is, called the Budapest ghetto. It is about 74 acres in size, quite tiny. There were over 80,000 Jews were crammed in. There is two red circles. The red circle with a plus sign in it is the building we moved in 1940. And it was part of the ghetto area. The red circle with nothing in it, that's the school I went to for a few weeks for first grade. All the streets, what you see there, is all blockaded by 7-foot stone wall. You couldn't climb up there. There was no in or out of the ghetto area. It was isolated completely. There were only 4 gates, and the gates were guarded inside and outside by Hungarian and German Nazis. It just was unbearable. We did have a radio, but we couldn't listen to news because the Nazis were jamming the wavelengths all the time. It was just overwhelming. We couldn't really sleep. Airplanes were flying over all the time, bombardment. War was going on in full-fledged. At night I sneaked up from that dungeon area, and I have seen searchlights to looking at airplanes to be shot down. Guns all the time. So the kids were always miserable. We never could sleep. We were always cold and damp and hungry. We were fed 1 meal a day. The food came from the Jewish agency, which was about 7 blocks from that building. The kindergarten was also supported by the Jewish agency of Hungary. So I'm going to tell you a couple of stories about the ghetto. It could have been end of September, beginning of November, beginning of October. We were playing in a courtyard, kids running around to have some fresh air. Beautiful day. I tripped on something. I hit my head and it started to bleed very badly. And my mother, Clara, panicked. But my kindergarten teacher, Rose, said to my mother, Clara, I take care of Andy. The first thing she did, remove the yellow star from my outer garment. Then she told me, you keep your mouth shut, you look down, you hold my hand, squeeze it as hard as you can, and walk with me. In the meanwhile, people trying to patch up my bleeding head with first aid, whatever they could do. And we left the building, and I was in a state of panic because we were told, never leave the building, and we must wear the yellow star. Both of them were violated. We walked to the nearest gate, maybe about 6-7 blocks away. And a guard yells at Rose, show me your ID. So she does. Pause for a second and says, well, you are not a Jew. What are you doing here? and Rose very calmly said, just like a kindergarten teacher would, I lost my husband a few years ago. Can't you see? My son's head is bleeding, and I'm trying to take him to the hospital. Eventually, the God let us out. We went to the hospital, which wasn't very far. The doctor patched up my head, and when we came back, the guard outside asked almost the same set of questions. But eventually we got back. When we got back to the building, everybody was thrilled. The moral of the story is major. Number one, Rose never was married. She was a spinster. Number two, she was a very religious Catholic, never missed a mass. Number three, she was truly a human being. She understood what was going on, and she was willing to sacrifice her life to save the life of the Jewish boy who's talking to you today. Because without her, I probably would not be here. There were many non-Jews who made effort to save Jewish life. My grandfather was hiding over 5 months. My brother-in-law was hiding about 7 months. Building to building, to street, just to be able to survive, one day at a time. How we were moving on, the conditions were deteriorated. The Hungarian and German Nazis were coming into the building, harassing the others regularly. I have seen with my naked eye how my mother, my kindergarten teacher Rose, and others from the building were put to the wall with hands up. They had guns, they could kill. Thanks God, it was more physical and verbal abuse. But in one day, could have been in the middle of November, they came early in the morning and rounded up all the adults from all the apartments, not realizing that there are 150 plus kids are hiding in that dungeon facilities. We were told we have to keep our marcher, no talking and no movement. So they didn't realize when we were there. Rounded up the people, took them away to a collection place. And there were hundreds of them all over in the city of Budapest. And when they arrived, there were thousands of people. Think about it, it's bigger than a football field, where people were standing to go through a process by the Nazis. But my grandmother from the village of Dunaharasti, I mentioned to you, where my mother was born, had noticed an SS guard, and she just dashed up to him and started to speak in a very strange German dialogue, which everybody spoke in that village, called Schwab. Swabia actually located in the southwest corner of Germany. It was so distant that the average German had a difficulty of understanding it. And SS God was stunned, and he said to my grandmother, "What are you doing here? Anybody who speaks that language cannot be a Jew. Go home." Well, my grandmother had the presents, and she said, "My cousins and my sisters are standing in line. They came up from the village. Hopefully then the city of Budapest will provide us a safer place than where we live." And SS God paused and said, "Take your family, go home." And everybody who was taken away from our building came back. Of course, we kids were thrilled. Her physical presence and stability of thinking saved everybody's life who were taken away from the building. Obviously, there were no cousins or sisters of my grandmother. The war was going on. The harassment by the Hungarian and German Nazis continued, day in and day out. And how we were moving toward December, things sort of slowed down. We knew that something has to happen. The war must come to an end. We had no real knowledge. There were some rumors were coming into the building, but no real knowledge. But these Nazi thugs came in close to Christmas time, rounded up everybody in the building again. But they came in a late afternoon and took them away. And when they arrived to a collection place, they knew what's going to happen. They go through a process, take them to a train station, and ship them to some concentration camps. Holy behold, the last speaker came in. He says, it's too dark already. People who is not precious, go home. We'll get you tomorrow. And everybody was taken away from our building, came back. You never know when a luck is on your side. And how we slowly but surely turned to January. We knew the war had to come to an end, quickly, because aeroplanes were not flying, the gunshots were not heard. And on January 17th of 1945, there are two husky military persons shows up in our building. Looked very different than what we have seen before. They were from the Red Army, Soviet military personnel. With body language, they were telling us, you know, the Budapest ghetto had been liberated. Of course, everybody was jubilating. What we are going to do now for the future. So I show you two pictures about a gate and a wall. This is a makeshift gate, and you can see the Jewish star, you can see ghetto, guard. It was just, probably was ready to be built. The next slide will show you actually a 7-foot stone wall. This wall was discovered in 1962 under urban renewal in the city of Budapest. You couldn't climb it. So my grandmother from the village said, I will walk back to my home, see if the building is still existing, and my store. She owned this general store, and she was loved by everybody in the village of Dunahara Street. And everybody knew that she's Jewish. In the village there were a few dozen of Jews who actually lived there. So she walked back the 7 miles. And go to the next slide, please. My grandmother owned that white dog. It was her pet, not only her pet, but our pet. My cousin Tom and I, we played with the dog all the time when we visited Grandma before the war. It was a gentle animal. So the dog was coming around to look for life and food. My grandmother lived with us in a city. Nobody was there. But a friendly neighbor, a good friend of my grandmother, a farmer's wife, have noticed my grandmother, dashed out of her house, hugged her, kissed her, and said, thanks God, you survived the horrors. I'm sorry. Totally disrespectful. You know, I used to teach in a university, so I know students, and I catch them when they are sleeping. If sort of dozing off is okay, but sleeping for 45 minutes is not okay. So what happened? They carried a conversation. And the farmer's wife said to my grandmother, your dog was coming all the time, and I fed the dog whenever I had noticed it. Unfortunately, there was the other sad part of the story. The other neighbor of my grandmother was a Hungarian Nazi, had noticed the dog was coming here just about the end of the war. He went back to his house, got his gun, came out, and guess what? Killed the dog. So the friends and neighbors said, what did you do that for? And I paraphrase what my grandmother told us. He said to the neighbor, it belonged to a Jew, it must die. This is what hatred caused, anti-Semitism. What the dog do to anybody? Devastating. I never forget the dog's name. I use it in my passports or user IDs. I'm thinking very fondly of it. So my grandmother walked back the 7 miles or so and took my cousin Tom and I back to the village to go to school. The next slide will show you my second grade picture. My second grade education was maybe about 8 weeks. The kids were able to play very well together, running around in Bachelor, going to the river Danube and swimming, just having a good time, breathing fresh air. Everybody knew I am a Jew, my cousin is a Jew, and people, there were about a dozen of them. So one piece of advice you have, and it is as current as possible, because I have heard it on television a couple of days ago, that a 10-year-old boy committed suicide because of bullying. So bullying is not allowed any place at any time. You don't make fun of anybody. You have no right. You must respect and honor. Instead of looking yourself for, to look into each other's eye, have a conversation. Doesn't matter what. I designed computers for 25 years. It is a very good tool to learn it, but it is not a toy. You may use it with discretion. Have respect for each other all the time. No pushing or shoving or calling names. I'll give you a couple of quick examples. My junior year in college, I was dating a young lady. She was on the plump side. If you would have called her fat, I would have twisted your head off right then and there. My best friend in college was the center of the basketball team. 6'8". I was about 5'3½". You don't call me a shrimp, and you don't call him a giraffe. Those are derogatory names. Respect. So keep that in mind. My mother came visiting the village regularly, but never talked about Dad, what happened with my father. And on the month of June of 1945, my mother came and said, I'll take you home. You need to help me. I have a job. I have to provide for you and for my grandparents and a few others. And I need to teach you 3 things. Shopping, no supermarket. Cooking, no private chef. And cleaning. No cleaning lady. So my mother thought, but how can we cook or clean? You needed hot water. So I had to go to the dungeon area, get the wood, take it up to the top floor, chop it up, and build a fire. Remember, I'm 7½. Little things like that. So when you have hot water, you put them in a bucket, and you want that to clean, you get down on your knees with soap and brush and scrub the floor. That's how you get cleaning. Or cooking. You had to get hot water. I prepared the food so when my mother came home, she was able to finish cooking it, like a sous chef. Go to the store, I had a list. Just one quick example. We had limited money, so you had to watch every penny what you spent. On the list was a word called egg. Not eggs, egg. So I went to the store, I bought one egg. You go to the grocery store or supermarket, you don't even think about picking up a dozen eggs. It was restricted. My mother was a genius cook. Meat, oh, forget it. Every now and then, when my mother and I went out to the village doing a harvesting, and from the farmers we were able to buy some meat. Not beef, chicken or duck. But I never starved. There was always a meal on the table. So holy behold, came July. And the same rose who saved my life was scraping top of her lungs. Clara, Clara, Clara. And my mother and I dashed to the corridor to the top floor. And then she said, your husband Steve is home. It didn't register, but when it did, I dashed from the top floor to the ground floor, faster than any rocket ever could move. There was a man standing there and I hugged him and kissed him. I was crying. And when I took 3 steps back like this, I looked at him. I did not recognize my own dad. He may have weighed at 70 pounds. To trying to describe to you what is 70 pounds, I'll tell you in a minute. My cardiologist tells me that I have to weight myself every day. I'm 130 pounds. Now think about somebody standing next to me who's 60 pounds lighter, skin and bones. But it was my father. It took my mother over a year to nourish him back to real life. During that year, there were many nights he was screaming, hollering, crying. And my mother said, ignore that. He is reliving the horrors. But he went through days and weeks and months in a death camp called Mauthausen, which is located in the southern part of Austria. Devastating. The conditions in Hungary were, political conditions in Hungary was very loose. There was no real government was established. Different parties took power, they broken down, and unfortunately, by late 1950, the Communist Party took power. And that was Soviet communism. So Hungary fallen from the Nazis into the communists. It was a brutality. Joseph Stalin was head of the Soviet Union. By the way, the Soviet Union was broken up under Mikhail Gorbachev to many, many different countries. One of them is Ukraine. Just was devastating. The freedom which we were looking for never existed. Because under Soviet communism there is no freedom of any kind. That system is promoted to push people down to the lowest common denominator. Confiscated all private properties. Everybody had to work for the government. It just was awful. People barely made enough money to be able to buy food and pay the rent. That was the system. I went to high school from 1951 to 55. Critical times for a teenager. We had to be very careful what we said in the classroom when we were, by the way, you guys go from one classroom to the next one from one period to the next one. We always sat in the same classroom. Teachers came in. When the teachers came in, everybody stood up with respect and honor. That's what you should be doing too. It was hard because we felt that the walls were bugged by the Soviets. And if you say the wrong words, at best you ended up in the principal's office. At worst, you were taken to the police station. And then who knows what? Because there were camps existed by the Soviets, that those people who were not agreeing with Soviet ideology were taken there. And unfortunately, many of them did die. So when I became senior, I applied to go to university. And I wasn't accepted for simple reason. Number one, go to the next slide, please. Everybody knew I am a Jew. Here is my birth certificate, original birth certificate. In a red circle, it says in the top line, my name, next line, my sex, and the next slide is abbreviation of my religion. The next slide is official translation, please. In a red box, it's written there. I used that document to become an American citizen. Number two, my father was labeled a capitalist. See, capitalism and Soviet communism is 180 degrees apart. Hopefully you know what 180 degrees. Soviet communism pushed people down to the gutter. Capitalism builds you up. Challenges, creativity, competition. And that's what made America to the greatest country in the world. It was, it is, and it's going to be. So I was rejected by the Hungarian government. So what I'm going to do? I went to a trade school. I was accepted with a high school graduate. I wanted to learn a profession, eventually get married, have children. The conditions really was bad. But the Soviet communists realized that they put too much pressure on the Hungarians, and he eased up. And by beginning of 1956, things were a little bit loosened. And that gave opportunity to the academia, the intelligentsia, and politicians who were disenchanted with communism to organize a demonstration, a march. It took place in October 23rd of 1956. I was almost 20 years old. 1 week short. And tens of thousands of Hungarians were on the streets listening to the speeches. When the speeches were over, the leader said, we will go to the radio station to declare what the Hungarian nation, the people of Hungary wants for the future. It turns out I was in the front line, how we were marching in the narrow streets. When we arrived to the radio station, by the way, Hungary had only 2 radio stations. Every town in this country has a radio station, just to give you a comparison. The leaders wanted to go in, but the guards, 2 guards with guns, didn't let anybody in. And they used guns to shoot bullets in the air to disperse the crowd. Nobody left. And that started the Hungarian Revolution. It is a major historical event to trying to get rid of the Soviet system out of the small Eastern European country called Hungary. The revolution lasted 8 days. I was able to go out of my house and feel free the first time in my life on my birthday, my 20th birthday. It was a real celebration. The revolution did win. Unfortunately, the Soviets who were continuously in the country, they removed themselves to the periphery of the cities of the country. But in the middle of November, they came back with vengeance. There are over 50,000 Hungarian lives lost during the revolution. And about 250,000 of them escaped.
Like 7 minutes left.
Good. About 250,000 of them escaped to Austria. All my friends left. After October 31st, I was looking for them. Couldn't find anybody. So November 23rd, in the morning, I told my parents I had no future in this country. I will go just like all the 250,000, and I escaped the country. I kissed them goodbye and I said, God willing, there will be a day we will meet again. The distance between Budapest and Vienna is 160 miles. It took me between 3 and 4 weeks to get there. But when I get there, I was able to get to the American embassy and was able to obtain documents which declared me as a Hungarian refugee and to able to come to the greatest country in the world called the United States of America. The next slide will only show you 2 pictures, not this one. Go back one. The victory of the revolution on the top and the bottom when the Soviets came back. That's a different topic we can talk about, what really happened. But the Soviets came back, destroyed everything in sight. The revolutionary government were arrested and eventually tried for treason and were executed. So after when I had my papers, designated day and time, went to a railroad station, and over 3,000 Hungarians were taken to Bremenhaven, Germany. And the next slide will show you the ship I came across, called the Marine Corps. This ship participated in the Second World War and then later on in the Korean War. I described to you the last day, 18 days. Just think about it, ocean liners today traveling in 4.5 days across the ocean. This ship was so tiny, and if you put next to it an ocean liner today, you didn't even notice it. Ocean is not very kind. We thought we would sink many times, but we didn't. On the last day, I am on the top deck. I wasn't seasick, so I was able to get there. At a distance, I have seen something unbelievable. I recognized the statue from my history book. And I started to cry. And people around me said, what the heck are you crying about? I said, you need a statue? No big deal, it's just a statue. I said, no, that statue is called the Statue of Liberty. It can be described with one word. It means freedom. This is what you and I have. No one else had the kind of freedom what we have in this country. And there is a plaque with a poem on the statue. I did read it. I took my children there. This is the most beautiful lady I have ever seen, including my wife. Emma Lazarus, a Jewish lady, wrote that poem. And if you have problem understanding what it says, talk to your teacher. He says, give me you tired, you're poor, your hollow masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, the tempest close to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. It means freedom. Cherish it every day when you get up. And thank that you are in the United States. A note, there is no vaccine against hate. You and I have to work every day, from morning to night, to eliminate it. So please, do so. The next slide will show you just how the anti-Semitism and the hatred to Jews in this country increased from 2020 to 2021 by 34%. And since October 7th of last year, today, fourfold, that means 400%. A distinguished congressman from the state of Georgia, served over 30 years there, a black gentleman. His name is John Lewis, fought for freedom against hate, discrimination. In one of his speeches he said, I believe in freedom of speech, but I also believe that we have an obligation to condemn speech that is racist, bigoted, anti-Semitic, or hateful. Just remember what that statement is. So now I will show you a next slide. I want to bring to your attention the three pictures on the right-hand side. You can achieve anything in life if you desire to. Work hard, spend time with the books, have perseverance. I was 75 years of age. A young lady challenged me to do a triathlon. And I didn't know what the triathlon was. So when I was explaining, I said, you must be crazy. I'm 75 and I haven't exercised for 40 years. I cannot do that. But she chewed on my ears. And eventually I signed up and I trained 4 months, 5-6 days a week, except on my Sabbath. I was either running or swimming or riding the bike. When a designated day, which is every year on the first Wednesday at the quasi-amusement park, when a whistle blown to go into the water, I went and I said, God, please help me to get through leg number 1. I was the only one in the whole 400 people who were there, including a 13-year-old boy. I was the oldest one. I was swimming breaststroke because I didn't know how to swim freestyle. Look at it. I'm coming after swimming over a half a mile. Then I got on my bike and I was riding the bike for 12.5 miles, 5 major hills. I thought I'd never make it. But holy behold, I was saying to myself, God help me get to the second leg. There I am, coming back with the bike. I said, I have it made because I can walk the 3 miles or the 5 kilometers. But I said, I will hustle. It was a very tough road because the course was sloping down and we had to come back on a loop. And the last 500 yards were uphill. I thought I'd never make it. There were 2 friends of mine who were screaming top of the lungs, Andy, you can do it. Keep hustling. And holy behold, I come through the finish line. I got 10 minutes off because I was in the last group of swimmers. So the point is, you can achieve everything what you want in life. Doesn't matter what it is. But be the best one. Respect your teachers, honor them, and work very hard to support your parents. They are there to provide you the very best. For you, they work hard. So honor them. I'm sorry that I'm late, but I wish you all good luck and a lot of good things in the future. Thanks a lot.